Happy Tuesday.
Happy
I almost
Tuesday.
sang it that time. I don't know why I did that. No one wants to hear
Oh,
me
I'm
sing
glad you
it.
didn't. I'm glad you
Okay.
didn't. You've never done any singing on this podcast, so I'm glad you didn't start today. We don't want to scare our guest off. so
Yeah.
we have an awesome guest today, and it's actually going to be our last guest for the year of 2024. So it's very exciting. I feel like we're finishing pretty strong. We have trauma-informed speaker and wellness coach, Danielle Anderson. How's it going, Danielle?
Oh, it is going well. Thank y'all so much for having me. I am excited to be here.
Good. We're really excited to have you on. We were kind of chatting just briefly before we got started that I think this is a pretty unique space that you're in, and I don't really think we've had anybody anywhere close. Maybe one person who does some similar things, but definitely not the exact same thing that you're doing. And so I'm excited to kind of pick your brain and hopefully give some information to our audience that they weren't aware of before. So I'm really excited and very thankful that you're willing to take some time out of your busy schedule.
Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. Yes, I definitely hope to be able to offer some information that will be of service, and so I can support people in their wellness journey in mind and in body and maybe even in spirit too.
Awesome. I love it. So obviously the show is called Connectable. And so we're all about connection and connecting our audience to new people and our guests to a new audience and vice versa. So typically we start off by letting people know how we're connected. And like a lot of people that we have on the show, it's through social media. And I
Mhm.
think when you look at our Instagram and the mutual connections, um, I think we have a decent amount of mutual connections. In fact, one person that you pointed out when we were having the back and forth to get this thing set up was JP or John Parker.
Yes.
And he's been on the show a few times. We love what he does with Baleka Run Club and wellness and all that. And so, amongst other connections, but I'm guessing that your information, your content started kind of infiltrating our timeline and our explore page through those different connections.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, I'm glad that we followed you and that you're here today. So it's pretty simple. Social media was the connection point for us.
Yes. Well, we love social media.
Yes, we do. It helps us out a lot. So, but all that being said, I'm gonna be quiet for now, and I'm gonna let you talk. So, tell us a little bit about who is Danielle Anderson, and then how did you get into this work that you do as far as trauma and wellness and all those different things.
Yeah, Danielle Anderson is a daughter, is a mom, is a woman who is really passionate about caring for her mind, her body, and her spirit so that she might be present and able to care that much better for those around her. I am one who is very passionate about doing this work that I do so that I can be what I call an agent of healing in my circle of influence. And my hope is to, as I get to support others, help them to grow as agents of healing in their circles of influence as well. And so it's really an honor to be able to come alongside individuals, predominantly Black women, to help them, as I like to say, get out of survival mode and into thriving. And so for fun, I love to read books, I love to watch movies, listen to podcasts, work out, be outside. And then in the professional space, I get to, like you said, I get to work as this trauma informed speaker, wellness coach, and somatic practitioner, which has been pretty incredible to be able to support people over the past few years.
That's awesome. Can you explain just to those who are listening, if they don't know what it is, what somatic practitioner is
Yeah,
or
so I think that's a great question. I use the verbiage somatic practitioner. So I am a certified yoga instructor, I am a fitness instructor, I am a meditation facilitator. And in this trauma informed space, somatic practices, somatic comes from the Latin word soma, which means body. And so somatic practices are really body practices that support your nervous system, that support your mind and your body. And so as I was really trying to think through what was a good title for myself, I am not a somatic therapist. I do not have that certification. Yet I do work with the body and incorporate somatic practices into my work as I support individuals in healing from past stress and past trauma, in helping to integrate their mind, their body, their spirit. So we're walking around as whole individuals rather than these kind of disintegrated, disconnected people. So that is what I mean by a somatic practitioner.
I love it. Thank you. And so how did you get started with all of this? Like what inspired you? Like what kind of background, is there something in your life that, something came about to where you're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or how did you
Yeah.
fall into this category?
Yes, absolutely. So I was introduced to yoga when I was a senior in college back in 2003. And I just kind of fell in love with it. It was also the same year as part of my, I think, graduation requirements. We had to take some type of, athletic credit. And so I took weightlifting and really fell in love with the gym and yoga. I was in the dance company of my university. I went to Rice University in Houston, Texas. And so I was part of Rice Dance Theater. And before that, I had always been someone who was really passionate about the body. I was a praise dancer at my church. I'm a proud member of my powder puff team. So I really was starting to grow and learn more about the body and the power and wisdom of it. So I started doing yoga and kind of my fitness journey then. And so you fast forward, I guess, 6 years, and I was pregnant with my first son. I'm the proud mom of four boys. And I used yoga as I was preparing for labor. My hope was to be able to do an unmedicated birth at a birth center with my midwife. And yoga was really powerful in helping me to get through unmedicated birth. And after I had my son, I just had to pause and I think take a moment to awe in the wisdom of the body. I was like, man, my body is very wise. Like it knew what to do. I didn't have to tell it what to do in labor. It just kind of knew what to do. And my midwife would say, just listen to your body. And that was the first time I heard that phrase. And so I think I continued on this path of learning to listen to my body. And that was really the main, how that looked on the ground really was yoga, breath work, meditation. And then I would say the real life-changing catalyst event that really put me on this particular trajectory happened in 2013. And I always like to slow down just to pause and prepare people because my story does include loss. And so in 2013, our family unexpectedly lost my 1-year-old son, Chase. And
Hmm.
this was in March of 2013. It is a pain that is excruciating that I wish upon no one. And in that season of very fresh grief, not even, not even a month into grief, I found out that I was pregnant again. And that came with a lot of mixed emotions. And so I called my midwife and asked her about just like, how do I do this thing called grieving while pregnant? And she gave me a lot of great advice. But one thing that really stuck out to me then was she said, your grief is going to affect this baby. So whatever you do, let yourself feel. If you need to cry, give yourself permission to cry. If you need to be angry, give yourself permission to be angry because trying to hold it in is only going to be counterproductive to growing a healthy baby. Now, at the time, I didn't fully understand what she was saying, but I was willing to follow her advice and kind of lean into this grief journey and listening to my body and allowing myself to feel. And so I began to just incorporate small things at that time of being present, of noticing what was happening in my mind, of noticing what was happening in my body, of noticing how I was feeling. And it was in that season that I really came to just awe in this incredible design that we are created whole, that our mind affects our body, affects our emotions, affects how we show up in the world. And I just started to explore even deeper about those connections. And so that led me into learning more about how trauma impacts the body, how stress impacts the body, how your past impacts your present. And so it all kind of came together through these different life experiences. And that is how I got to be where I am now. It was through my own journey of having to learn how to incorporate various mind, body, and breath practices to facilitate and support my own healing that allows me to now be able to support others. And so I always like to say, as I tell my story, I am not okay. I'm not done grieving. I haven't arrived at the destination. Like, no, I am very much on a path of what I call ongoing grief and ongoing restoration. So has there been healing that's happened? Yes. Do I feel like I am able to support people and offer comfort and encouragement from my own discomfort and my own pain and tragedy? Yes. Do I still miss my son every day? Absolutely. And so it's this interesting tension between, grief and joy and sadness and celebration. And I get to walk with others as they toe that line.
Wow.
Yeah. That's well, thank you for sharing that. We appreciate that. That's in having two young girls myself, 5 and 3. It's even when you say that, it's hard not to. It's hard to even put myself in your shoes,
Oh yeah.
because of, like you said, the pain would be unimaginable going through all that. And it's interesting because, like, if you take sports for example, if you have a coach who has achieved amazing things and has won championships, you have those athletes will look at them and think, okay, we're going to follow this leader because they've done it before and they've achieved something great. You're kind of the same thing, but instead of having this example of something great that you achieved, the reason people are coming to seek your help is because you went through something awful. And that, like you said, it's a very interesting place to be because you have a lot of trust from these people that you work with, but not because of you've obviously been successful in what you're doing, but the main reason they're reaching out is because they know that you went through a tremendous amount of pain. It's a very interesting. That is a very interesting place to be.
Yes, I think people that get to work with me understand that I too am on this wellness and healing and growth journey. And I, I might be X number of years ahead in a sense of being willing to go through the tunnel and face some hard things. And I've been willing to get uncomfortable because I know that there is light and there is joy and there is healing on the other side. And sometimes you need someone who's gone through the tunnel to be able to tell you, I it is going to be uncomfortable. I am not promising you ease at every step. We are going to rest. We will find ease, and there will be some effort too. If we keep going though, on the other side, you can experience life to the full, and you can experience a life that includes you living more as your authentic self rather than getting stuck in these past programming of the body or getting stuck in stress or stuck in trauma. There really is the possibility of growth and healing. And it always is an honor to kind of companion along companion alongside someone as they take that journey.
Yeah, well, I imagine it would be incredibly rewarding and probably really challenging too. And one of the things that Deb we've podcasted together for 5 or 6 years now, and one of the things that Deb has mentioned quite a few times over the last couple of years is this idea of how we evolve as people. Right, you go through different seasons of life, your interests change, your passions change, your the pain that you go through changes, all these different things, and then you evolve as a person. And so I imagine that would be one of the bigger challenges for you as a coach who it's the whole idea of, hey, one person's, or what's the phrase, one person, you're looking at the whole book for one person and a chapter for someone else, or what, I'm blanking on what the actual phrase is, but they may see where you're at. And even though you've mentioned, hey, I've gone through it, I'm still going through this process, but they may, if they're just starting with you, I imagine some people are like, I want to get to where you're at, but I can't even imagine going through these steps. Like, how much of that do you have to walk them through when you initially start working with a client?
I think I have to just help people understand in general. And it's not even, it hasn't really been vocalized to me that, like, oh, I want to be where you are. I think it has been vocalized, it's going to take time. And
Hmm.
so I do just try to set expectations and, sobered expectations to let people know, yes, this journey is very much a journey that matches more the pace of nature and the pace of agriculture than the pace of industry. And so
Hmm.
there is always a level set where we do talk about, listen, we live in a microwave society. We live, on demand. You can watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. And we're used to things being fast, being instant. And I have to just kind of slow that down, pause, and get people to step back and go, and let's look at a garden. Let's consider the bamboo tree. We plant this seed, like I think for a bamboo plant, and I think it's 5 years before the plant even breaks the surface because it has to get these root systems developed. But in that very first year, once it breaks the surface, I think it can grow up to 50 feet, I want to say. So I don't give them that example to say, and now it's going to be 4 years until you see, 4 or 5 years until you see fruit. But there is this work where there is a little bit, and this is a common phrase in the yoga world, there's some rooting down to rise up. And so just like with the plant, we have to have some root systems get developed. And so this work, there might be some discomfort and you might not see what you want to see instantaneously. But if you can be consistent, if you can keep going, I promise you that you will rise. There will be a harvest, there will be fruit. And so when they have me, I think supporting them and going alongside with them, I'm constantly having, reminding them of those things. And we do a lot of celebrating small wins to acknowledge, hey, You might not have done this big goal that you wanted, but today you made this choice rather than this other one. And as we go, those moment by moment choices really do add up. And that's really the path that I walked. I tell people since 2013, I had to resolve in that season when we were fresh in grief that I had to take this one moment at a time. I actually couldn't let myself look too far ahead. I remember having other moms who had lost their sons supporting me in that season. One mom had lost her son 3 years prior to me. Another mom had lost her son 10 years prior to me. And I remember, 1, 2, 3 months in, looking at them and going, there is no way. There is no way I will ever get that far. I will never get to living life 3 years without Chase. I will never make it 10 years without Chase. And I had to resolve. I can't look too far ahead. I just have to take this one moment at a time. And I've been telling people that I've been living this one moment at a time life for 11 and a half years now.
Yeah. I think that's some of the best advice. The one moment at a time advice. One of my good friends told me that a while back when I was going through something, when one of those situations where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get past this. I don't know how I'm going to move forward. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I, dove into like Bible study and like just tried different things like therapy, group therapy, individual therapy, kind of tried talking to different people. And one of my friends, I was just kind of like, I just need to take it one day at a time, I guess. She's like, no, one moment at a time. She's like, don't even look at the day. Like you're going to have to just look at like right now, like what you're feeling right now. Because I can't imagine like how hard it is to just filter through all your emotions when you're going through something, trauma. And, just, I watched my sister, she lost her daughter. And then a few years later, then she got pregnant. So, your story that just reminded me of like, I watched her go through that and just, it was hard for her to be happy and then she'd be sad. And so I watched her do that and she's like, I'm so happy that I'm, pregnant, but like, I'm still grieving Sammy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know what that was like, I just said one moment at a time. That's all I knew what to say.
Yeah.
One moment at a time.
And so much of the journey is learning how to live in the midst of those tensions, in the midst of a human can occupy celebration and sadness at the same time. And I actually wrote a book and it's called Joy in the Morning, Mourning. And it's to try to hold space for that reality. Scripture talks about we grieve with those who grieve, we mourn with those who mourn, and rejoice with those who rejoice. And I always tell people, and those two places are not mutually exclusive. As one person, I can occupy multiple places at one time. And so a lot of the work is learning how to accept the human experience and recognize that the human experience in one moment can include deep, deep joy, deep, deep sorrow and great, great joy. And that's I think the complexities that we get to walk in as humans. And I do think that our culture oftentimes doesn't give us permission to walk in all those complexities. We can be very binary. You're either happy or you're sad. And I love the phrase, the power of and. And I use that a lot with my clients. And as we talk, they might say, today is a hard day. And I'm actually happy that I got to watch my son take his first steps. Okay. Because both of those two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah. And I think it's hard for some people to grasp that concept, right?
Yeah.
That it could, even like my mom passed away when I was in high school. And I remember thinking like, am I supposed to be, because I remember feeling happy at school because I was a teenager, right? I'd go to school, I'd be joking around with my friends and someone would comment and be like, oh, you look like you're doing good. And I'm just like, oh, am I supposed to be sad? Like, it was just so confusing. Like, I'm like, am I supposed to be sad? I am sad. But like in this moment, my friend just made a joke and I laughed, but am I supposed to be sad 24/7? Like, it was just, you feel guilt. And so I think it's just, it's refreshing and you just, I think really healthy with what you're doing, of course. And just, whoever's listening to hear that it's okay to, like you said, feel everything. And then that's okay.
Absolutely. It is okay to be where you are. And being where you are might be a complex cocktail of various emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious. I mean, obviously we're only 20 minutes in and you've provided so much awesome content already, But what was so it's kind of a two-part question. What was the response like when you started with this work, amongst your own community and the people around you, family, friends? I guess what was the response like? And then specifically, as you mentioned before, your primary focus is women in the Black community. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious, I don't know if a lot of people are working in the space that you're working in, or if this is a very kind of a unique thing, but what was the response like I said, amongst your community, but then specifically the Black women that you serve, like what was
Mhm.
their response when you started doing this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Initially, I would say the response for my immediate community was a lot of celebration. I think many of my family and friends in particular could see, oh yes, this work is needed. And then there was this other dynamic of, but people don't know they need it. So um, that was kind of an interesting territory to learn to navigate. And I'm still honestly navigating it, trying to find the right verbiage to call out some of the pain points to help people understand and have their eyes open to these problems. And it still is tricky because this reality of stress and trauma impacting our body, I use the verbiage a lot that it keeps us stuck in survival mode. And many people are living in survival mode has become their norm, and so nothing necessarily feels off sometimes, and so it can be difficult for them to even want to engage with some of this work. They're like, oh no, I'm fine, and it's like, actually you're overfunctioning, or actually you're stuck in this survival mode that is hiding in plain sight, that's become normative, but it's wreaking havoc on your system somewhere. And so for especially for Black women, I'm very passionate about this work for Black women because I find that many of us, it's just so common to have this kind of this caricature of the strong Black woman, and you take care of everybody else, and you carry at your own expense, and you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, and everything that comes with that caricature really is, we're being told to live with stress as our norm. We're being told to accept a life of constant doing, of constantly producing, of constantly caring for other people. And it really is so common. And whenever I work with Black women, we always then reference the Black women that came before us. Like, yeah, my mom lived this way, my grandma lived this way, my aunt lived this way. And it's been passed down. And then, culture is telling us one thing. And I was actually in a meeting one time, and I was talking about how I wanted to support Black women. And she was like, and I was like, yeah, we're tired of being strong. And it was a white woman. And she was like, but y'all are so strong. I'm like, we tired. Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to be strong anymore. We want to
Yeah.
rest. Like, but we have to be given permission to do that. And so there is a passion to help Black women. I have found that women in general often live like this. I don't know if that's because we live in a patriarchal society or because who knows what it is, but I mean, it's definitely not um, solely unique to Black women. I have just found in my experience and the people that I want to support, it works really well to target Black women because there are many spaces that Black women don't feel like they belong in. And so the spaces that I curate, they really do feel like, oh, this was made for me. Like I belong here. And I use the phrase often. Um, I really am. I'm Black women focused and people friendly. I definitely have certain programs and offerings that are women focused. I'll say I'm Black women focused and women friendly. But in general, the work that I do, as I sit down and think about my ideal client avatar, and I'm like, this is humans. Humans need this work. People. Um, but if you try to talk to everyone, you end up talking to no one. And so
Sure.
my target is Black women, but I am Black women focused and people friendly because all of us have nervous systems, and all of us have been impacted in some ways by past stress and past trauma. And many of us don't know how that past is impacting our present. And so it's an honor to come alongside people and help them to recognize that, have their eyes open to it, to be present, and then make some conscious choices to help change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thought too. Going back to what you said about the interaction you have with that woman, she's like, "Hey, you guys are all really strong." It's interesting because it's the same. Two different people are looking at the same thing and coming away with two completely outlooks, right? Like
Mhm.
one person's like, "There's a lot of strength in this community," and you're saying, "No, there's a lot of people that need help and maybe aren't aware that they've just accepted this reality that has been passed on from generation to generation."
Mhm.
Same thing, two outlooks. One sees it as a positive thing, and then the other, side sees it as a negative thing. So I feel like that's got to be a tough thing that you have to navigate with, right? Like there's, I mean, again, going back to sports, and like you mentioned with your fitness background, there's this idea of grinding, right? You just keep grinding and grinding and grinding. And you look at any YouTube motivational video and that's a positive thing. And then you look at
Hmm.
some people that have grinded for 20 years and it's like, oh, this is taking a toll on their body, their mind, and their soul.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's got to be a tough thing for you to kind of battle with, because it's like, I imagine every day you go on social media, you can see both sides and people
Yes.
arguing for both sides. And that's what you're kind of up against.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I will continue to be on that side of rejecting the hustle, rejecting the grind, rejecting phrases like Black women have to work twice as hard to earn half as much. And it's like, we tired out here. Like, we're just tired.
Yeah.
And and it's time, I think, for Black women especially to be able to be their full self, to be able to live life as their authentic self. Many women I talk to, they'll use, I mean, verbiage they use is, I feel like I'm just existing rather than living. Um, one woman said, I feel like that my life is slowly killing me. I mean, it's a lot, it's all these sometimes violent language of like, no, this is harming me. And so I love and support all movements that are helping, especially Black women, to resist the grind and resist the hustle, because our bodies have worked so hard for so long. And that has, that has impacted our body's programming. What I often refer to as kind of like these subconscious automatic habits that we just go to. Like, it's kind of ingrained. And, we don't even have time to talk about some of the historical realities that make that so in our bodies. Like, we feel like we have to always be on, always be working. And I'm like, it's time for a shift. And I love to think about this work as generational work, that it is healing, our present generation. It's changing generational patterns for those that come after us. And it's also kind of healing behind us as well. Like, for those who came before me that are still alive, a lot of this work I do in honor, like, of my mom. My mom, how she had to live, always focus on the kids and just making sure we had enough money, whatever. Now I get to rest in her honor sometimes. And then she gets to tell me, hey, I'm listening to what you said, Dee Dee. I'm listening to my body and I'm taking a break. And I think about my grandmother, Mimi, who has passed on. And there are things I do today in honor of her. Mimi didn't have, even being able to, she didn't have the science of all the benefits we have about, the nervous system and neuroplasticity and how trauma and stress affect the body. Mimi didn't know that. So Mimi didn't even know how to complete her stress cycle, or she didn't know how to use somatic practices to discharge stress and trauma from her body. I do. And so I get to do this work. And I often think about, man, I'm doing this in honor of Mimi. So there's this kind of backwards healing that happens. And of course, going forward, my hope is to model a different life for my boys, so that they will grow up and understand, okay, as Black men, you don't have to hustle. Rest is a right that you get to have as a human. It is not a reward for producing. And so, where I'm trying to teach them these things, I'm teaching them how to feel their feelings and, listen to their body and learn these breath and body practices to help them regulate themselves when they feel a little dysregulated. This is life-changing stuff. So it's so fun to do it and to model it for my boys and to share it with those outside my family too.
I love everything you're saying. So I'm a high school, so I don't know if you knew this, Danielle, but I'm a high school PE teacher. So I'm around teenagers all day, every hundreds of them. And everything you just said, I'm going to try to, not that I could teach it to them really quickly. Like, I wish a lot of them had these tools to just kind of, I mean, I'm lucky that, speaking of somatic, that they get to move in my
Yes.
class, because a lot of them need to with all the emotions there. I mean, I had 4 kids cry to me, to like crying about something today, which is unusual for high school
Hmm.
kids because it's not cool to cry, right? Like the
Hmm.
younger kids, like elementary, middle school, it's a little more like, just kind of common, it happens. But the high school kids, they don't. But lately, especially the past couple of years, I don't know if it's has to do post COVID, because COVID, that was really rough to just
Hmm.
not have them socialize, and that's a whole other topic, probably. But I feel like they don't have a clear grasp on how to regulate their
Hmm.
emotions. So I think, even, I mean, so I guess I just thought of a question, like, does your age group, with people you work with, is it just adults, or do you sometimes work with younger kids, or what, yeah, that just popped in my head actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great question. No, I mostly work in one-on-one settings with adults,
Yeah.
and as a speaker, I get to do group experiences, and so I have had a chance to support kids in different ways. I had a chance to support a high school group this past March, and a few years ago, I actually had a chance to support an elementary school. I actually would come in weekly and teach some of these practices. We learned about our body, and we learned about the breath, and we learned about how to use various tools to I don't think we use the word regulate, but just like to find our center. I think was some of the verbiage we use. So yeah, this work, I get to work with, I always say I get to work from people from 5 years old up to 95 or 100.
That's great. And it's useful for everyone because like I said, like why wait till you're older to learn how to regulate your emotions?
Right.
Because it starts, when they're, our brains are still developing. There are skills that I learned in therapy at the age of 30 that
Yes.
I'm like, why didn't I have this when I was 17 when my mom passed away? Like, why didn't I go into therapy right then and there to learn how to do all this? So it's just super helpful. And like you said earlier, that there are certain people that you want to help and you should help, but they don't know they need help. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's most of the population. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, just that like the skill of emotional regulation alone. I was just talking to a group today. We were talking about, man, this is crime prevention. This is, a life-saving technique because we have seen things that happen when someone is dysregulated, when someone is completely like they see red and there is violence that is done, there's harm that is caused. And when we as humans can learn how to tolerate these internal sensations within and give ourselves permission to let these emotions move and let them out in a way that is helpful rather than harmful to self, to others, or to property, we really do change lives. Like it's no small thing. So I love that you get to teach some of these skills to high schoolers because yeah, we need it. I think I don't, and I'm so grateful now that in schools people are doing a lot more teaching on social emotional learning, and there are starting to be a lot more even embodied practices brought into school. For those that grew up when I grew up, that wasn't. I mean, we had PE, but we weren't really taught how to check in with our emotions, how to use our words to communicate. And so you have all these, adults who are sure they are age wise, they are adults, but emotionally we're children. And so that's fun. Or part of the work I get to do is fun because I get to help people mature in their emotional health so that if they're parents or if they're, impacting the next generation through whatever capacity, parent, teacher, whatever, they get to model for the next generation. This is what emotional health looks like. I expect you 2-year-old to throw a tantrum. I do not expect you 45-year-old man to throw a tantrum.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So not to take this in an immature direction, take a little bit of a right turn here. One of the questions I sent you was straight from your website, and in your bio, it mentions that you're a gummy bear snob.
Yes.
And so I kind of need to know I've never heard someone refer to themselves as a gummy bear snob. So I need to know what that means, and then I also need to know like what's the top of the food chain as far as gummy bears, because I'm assuming it's always like Haribo, right? Or Haribo is always at
Yeah,
the
that's
top,
what
but
many
maybe
people
I'm wrong.
think, but not for me.
That's why I asked the
Haribo is not my
question.
number one. Albanese.
Albanese.
Albanese
I'm gonna write that
is my
down.
top one. I find that it's much softer than Haribo. Haribo's too hard. And
I agree.
and they're lots of fun flavors and they're just squishy bears. I like them. They're my favorite.
Okay. That's interesting. So you've done some research, because like, if you're going out on a limb and saying you're a snob, you've
I
tested
mean,
this.
I have enjoyed many a gummy bear in my day. So those are one of the Albanese definitely brings me joy for sure. And I have that on my website just as a way to like help people see like I'm a human and I like candy.
Yeah.
And I like to intentionally, even as part of my work, I like to intentionally incorporate things that bring me joy into my life in little ways. Like earrings bring me joy. So I like to wear fun earrings. Gummy bears bring me joy. And so sometimes as a celebration, I'll like treat myself to getting my Albanese gummy bears because I think that there's power. And I believe that I know that there's power in conscious choice. And so for me to consciously choose my Albanese as a way to celebrate or as a way to just enjoy a sweet treat, that's actually healing for the body. That's actually a way that we connect mind and body. And so that's an intentional, fun addition to my bio.
I
Well, I'm
love
gonna
that.
tell my wife that it's like we need to get gummy bears because I need some healing. And so I was told by a professional this will work.
Oh,
How do you feel about like chocolate chip cookies? Does that help too?
oh, if it does it bring you joy?
It brings me probably more joy than it should, if I'm honest.
Listen, I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan of making conscious choices
Yeah.
that are healthy in the moment. I was talking to one like about this today. I can do the same action, right, but have two very different motivations. So I can lean into the chocolate chip cookie as like emotional support because I don't know how to regulate my emotions. And so now I'm going over here just trying to numb out or whatever with my sugar. Or I can consciously go, I just want to enjoy something sweet and tasty. And I'm going to lean in and eat my chocolate chip cookie. Same action, very different postures. And so much of my work is about those internal realities and paying attention to it. And so, yeah, if you're in a place where you can make that conscious choice to enjoy the cookie in a way that's healthy for you, enjoy that cookie.
I love
That's
that. That is really good. All jokes aside, that is great advice. So
yeah.
I'm gonna try to think about that next time I eat a chocolate chip cookie. It's usually it's just like I'm eating this thing because I'm just diving in. But yeah, it
Yeah,
makes sense. Like you two different outcomes or two different mindsets, and very different results. So I
very,
love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Well, speaking of fun and things like that, I am curious, and I have an idea of the kind of things that you do, but obviously you've mentioned rest and how
hmm
important rest is. What are some things that you do when you're not working with clients, when you have a chance to just rest, relax, kind of recharge the batteries? Like, what are some of those
Yeah.
activities that you enjoy engaging in?
Yeah, so I love getting outside. So I call myself solar powered. I just love being in the sun. And
It's
so
pretty good.
resting for me is getting outside. I sometimes I'll just sit on my patio and I'll just play music out there, have a book or not, and I'll just sit and watch the leaves and I I talk to the trees sometimes. I feel like my Mimi did that. So I'm like, hey friend, hey trees, how y'all doing today? If I
Nice.
get to be by a beach or the ocean, that is my happy place. I call myself, I'm like Moana. I'm like, the ocean is a friend of mine. And so I just love it. I love being outside. Um, I also am one who really, I rest into movies. I really like a good story, a good movie, cinematography, acting. I really appreciate those things. So usually every weekend, part of my rest practice is going to include resting into a film. I love reading books. And for a long time, I think because of the church space I maybe was a part of, I started to think that the only kind of reading you could do was like books by theologians.
Hmm.
And I don't know why, but so for a long time, I stopped reading. And as a kid, I loved my books. I was a big R.L. Stein fan. I had all my books very neatly organized in my shelf. Do not crease my spine. I was very organized, very loved my books.
Yeah.
And so a few years ago, when I was doing this work and trying to like just get back to who is true Danielle, I was like, Danielle likes to read. Danielle loves to read, actually. And Danielle's not going to feel guilty if she reads a book that's not about theology. So
Hmm.
I've been reading a lot more and it's been so fun. I think I just finished my 47th book of the year. Um, and so those are some of my things I do for fun. Of course, games. I like to play. So I love playing games, whether it's with my boys, with my friends. Game nights are a win. Karaoke is more rare, but I love karaoke with people singing. So these are some of my, go-to rest practices. And of course, if I just need like some physical, like stillness rest, I'm going to get on the floor and throw my feet up the wall.
There you go.
Love it. Love
I
it.
love that. I know we only have you for about, I think, 15 more minutes, maybe a little bit longer, but I have to ask. So, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, there's different categories, but my all-time favorite movie since I was a kid is the movie Little Shop of Horrors with Rick
Oh,
Moranis.
nice. Okay.
I can like sing all the lyrics and I can, I sometimes I put that movie on and it's another like intentional joy practice. I'll put that movie on in the background like while I'm cleaning or something and
Sure.
I'll just sing along with it on the 23rd day of the month of September and I just go. So that's my favorite, over time movie. More recently, I love Moana. Like I'm just amazed. I'm just kind of
I'm
obsessed
familiar.
with the
Yeah.
identity story of Moana.
Yeah.
So I love that one. And if you wanted like a more serious, you know what I really love? I think my alter ego is a female assassin. I love Kill Bill Volume
Okay. That's an incredible set of movies.
One.
That's
Great.
awesome.
Um, I have a question just about going back to like mental health and all the things that you do. Sorry to get
Yeah.
away from your movie questions, Josh, but I have
Oh,
so many.
actually, hold on. If we're gonna get away from movies, I have one question to ask you. Have you
Okay.
seen Moana 2?
I have seen Moana too.
Is it worth seeing in the theater?
It is worth seeing in the theater. It is
Okay.
not, it is not going to live up to the hype of Moana 1. I will say that.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I'm gonna let my wife know because if we take our girls, I just want to know what I'm getting because we really enjoy the first one as well.
Oh yeah,
And so, but I've heard the same thing from a lot of people that it's good, not great like the first one.
sure. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, Deb, go ahead.
It's okay. I have 1,000 more questions for her. We only have like 14 minutes. So I'm like, I gotta get okay. Um, well, like when I was going to therapy, I heard the phrase a lot. Like when I would be talking about something, my therapist would say, "Well, you can't control that. Well, you can't control what they think or they say or like you. That's not you. That's out of your control. So what can you control?" And I just find it's a phrase. Just it's a, and I'll tend to say it back to someone who's a friend confiding in me. I just take my therapy my therapy practice and like, well, my therapist would say this, so I'm going to say this to you. Is that something that you find that people have in common when they're going through some trauma and stress? Because I can imagine that's something that we just want to grasp something that we can control. And what are some things you would say to them?
Absolutely. Very, very common. It is a yes. That is control is one that I am constantly working in my own self, having to practice surrendering and practice, okay, what is actually in my scope? And so when I talk to people just about this, we oftentimes will create affirmations and use affirmations as a tool to support us in this surrendering practice. And so I might say like, I, Danielle, am responsible for my choices, not the responses of others, because for me, there was a time where I would try to move around and do things based on how I thought you'd respond. And I had to remind myself, actually, that narrative, Danielle, of you thinking you can control their response is actually not true. So let's use affirmations. Let's notice in the body where I feel this need for control. Is it in my shoulders? Is it in my low back? And so we'll kind of combine both mind and body practices to support us. We'll do a body practice and we might lay down and just feel ourselves being held, and we practice surrendering. We practice letting go in the body because that helps us and supports us as we practice letting go in the mind. And so, yeah, control is definitely one that is just a common, I think, part of the human experience. We just want to be in control. And I think, and helping people to reframe and understand there's actually freedom in surrender. It's not a giving up. It's a conscious choice to surrender. Is helpful for people.
Yeah, a thing my therapist would often say to me, like, you can't control, or you're not responsible for other people's like feelings or emotions. And I've Josh and I talked about it. I think I've talked about it on some episodes before, especially the being free to evolve episodes, because that's like I grew up being a huge people pleaser. To this day, I still kind of am, but I have to remind myself like I'm not what they think or what someone else thinks or how they feel. Like that's not my responsibility. I have to tell myself that's not my responsibility. That's not, let them feel their feelings, let them go through their own journey.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Because I always want to make everything better. And
Yeah.
so do you get a lot of, along with, wanting to be in control and like hyper independence, do you get a lot of people pleasers as well?
Absolutely. And we talk about how oftentimes when we operate in people pleasing tendencies, a lot of times that's actually a signal that our body is stuck in a survival mode called fawn. The one we're very familiar with fight and flight and freeze, but there is one called fawn that I find that many women are stuck in. And I know that I was stuck in fawn for a long time. And it's one that the fawn is all about, like, it's almost like a self-abandoning survival mode. Like, let me do what I need to do to please you to make sure I'm safe. So let me self-abandon. Let me please you. Let me not ever acknowledge that I have my own needs. Let me only do what's best for you and not ever consider myself. And so as we're working through and unpacking these things, a lot of times it really does come down to identity, like, and us being honest about where we're finding our identity. And even my dad actually, decades ago used to call me a control freak. And I've had to, over time, practice, I've had to acknowledge, like, those words were spoken over me and kind of absorbed into my body. And I kind of operated in that. And then I had to realize, no, no, that's not who I am. I am not a control freak. I am Danielle, fully loved, fully known, chosen, holy, whatever it is. And so I think underneath a lot of control work is really getting to the core identity of who we are so that we know, who I am. I can differentiate that from the responses of other people, which is why I think I love the Moana movie so much, because it's such an identity story. She
Yeah.
has to go through this journey to know who she is. And I find that many people, we don't know who we are. And so we're going around kind of like, hey, can you validate me? Can you tell me who I am? Can I do this for you? And you give me the right response? No, we have to know who we are. And then one of my affirmations, like I had to tell myself, I am already loved. And so I work from that and not for that. And to me, those prepositions matter. I'm not working for your validation, for your approval. So I'm not trying to control and manipulate how you respond to me. When I'm really anchored in who I am, I can go out into the world very secure. And now I can actually love and care for you from a secure place rather than an insecure place.
I think that's a huge, huge concept, an important concept for people to grasp. So thank you for saying that, just because for whoever's listening, I dove myself into podcasts listening to advice like the such advice that you're giving right now, and it helped me a lot. I can't imagine how much better off I would have been if I would have started listening to you and what things that you had to say back, years ago. So thanks for sharing all that.
You're
It's
very
great.
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have one more question for you, and it's almost like the flip or the opposite of what you just shared. Is I feel like when people have experienced some kind of trauma and
Mm-hmm.
they're going through that healing process, or maybe they're currently in a fight against a like a life threatening disease, or
Mm-hmm.
they've gone through something, or they're currently going through something. I think one of the things that sometimes goes untalked about is the support system around them. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the challenges is you want to help, you want to be there for that person, but really the only person that knows what it's like to go through that specific thing is the person who's going through it. And then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that help becomes more of a frustration or a hindrance to the person who's going through it, because it's almost like these people don't really know how to help. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you have for whether it's a spouse, significant other, family member, even maybe a child, if they're a grown child of someone who's going through something, they want to help, but they're not sure how to, or maybe they're trying to help, but it becomes more invasive than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
What would your, I guess, advice be for someone who is close to someone who's going through something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is learn how to ask good questions. So not, you know, how can I help? But almost offering the help in the question. Would it be helpful if I brought you a meal tomorrow? Like being explicit in the question, in the ask, like almost baking the offer in the ask,
Yeah.
so that the person, because the person, you're right, they might not actually know how they can be helped. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of the burden of thinking, some of the mental energy, it takes it off of, or the mental effort off of them, if you can offer a tangible thing in the ask. I also would learn um, how to get comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And so what
Yeah.
I mean by that, someone might come up to someone who is grieving or suffering, dealing with something, and the helper has an idea of how the help is supposed to look. And they have to like let that go. And so they might want, like, oh, I just want to come and, I want to come clean your kitchen. And the other person's like, I don't really want that now. Could you just sit with me? And just being a person who is present for your loved one, for your friend, sometimes that can be uncomfortable because we're trying to look for something to do. Like, no, the help has to be a tangible do. Sometimes the help is your presence. And I think if we can learn to get comfortable in silence and in just holding space for someone, in offering a listening ear, hey, and being upfront about that. Hey, I don't even know how to help you. What I can offer is a listening ear. Would you like to talk and just have me listen? I won't even offer any advice or anything. And just like that's a good offer because they might just need a listening ear. And I love that you brought up the part of community, because healing does happen in community. Healing is a relational thing. And so we can't we can't go alone on this journey. And so even if we don't necessarily know explicitly what we want as the person who needs the help, or we don't know explicitly like what to offer, let's try something. And so for the person who's offering, you might make mistakes. Be willing to take the risk. You might say something foolish. Be willing to take the risk, own it, apologize, do what you can to repair if you say something foolish, and then stay with them. Keep trying to offer that help and keep trying to be that support in that season to your friend or to your family member.
I think it's perfect advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that could be a topic all by itself. As with many things that you've talked about on this podcast.
I feel like everything we talked about could be subtopics, and it could all be different episodes. I'm
It
trying.
really, it really could be.
Some of that I want to make that my next book, is about how, particularly for how to support those who are grieving. I really want to, just offer some tips around that, because I find, especially in our culture, grief is not really a welcome thing. It's not really something that's normative. In other cultures, I believe in, I want to say it's Thailand, grief is a communal experience. People wear, I believe, black bands on their arms, so the community can know, oh, that person is grieving. Let me tread lightly, or let me bring a meal. But here, it's not the case. We kind of grieve in silence, and we grieve alone. And people will think, just like you mentioned in your example earlier, Deb, like, oh, she's laughing today. She must be fine. She's not grieving her mom anymore. It's like, no, I'm still very much hurting. Don't leave me alone. Come check on me, please. And I find that we just don't know how to do that. And it makes me sad to see that, where people who are grieving, and they're just kind of grieving alone because they are depleted by their grief, and they don't know how to ask for what they need because they don't know what they need. It's a whole thing. So before I go on a whole tangent, yeah.
I think that would be a great book, because you've been through it. You have great advice, and you are clearly a person who understands like the concepts of all the different changes that you've had to go through and all that. So I think you should definitely do that. Not that you need my permission or my validation. You should. I would read it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this has been awesome. Like I said, I feel like we could talk. This really flew by. I was shocked to look at the time, like, oh, we're already done. So we're very thankful that you came through and shared. I know I sent you a list of questions, and I told you it was very loose. It's a very loose guideline, and I think that's the sign of a good episode is when we barely scratch the surface of those questions, and still had I think a really, really great conversation. So
I would want to have you back on. Can we have you back on again?
I'd love to come back on.
Oh, perfect. Usually we say that for off air so we don't put the pressure on, but Deb just went for it. Good for you, Deb. I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to call her out. So I'm glad your answer was yes. No, yeah, we would definitely love to have you back on because there's so many other things that we could talk about. But in the meantime, until our next chat on the podcast, if people heard the things that you said and felt like that would be something that would be beneficial for them, or maybe someone that they know, where can they follow you on social media and websites, all those different things?
Yes, thank you for asking. My Instagram handle is actually my name on the screen for those that watch the video. It's at Danielle.L.Anderson with an O-N. And my website is wellwithdanielle, DANIELLE.net. And you can learn more about my offerings and just the work that I do in this wellness space of helping people get out of survival mode and into thriving.
Awesome. Very cool. So that was great. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy this upcoming holiday season that we're currently in. And good luck with everything moving forward. We're excited to I don't know when the new book may come out or when that timeline is, but we're very excited for that. And you also mentioned you have a book out right now, right?
It's about to release, actually. I have my first copy right here. I'm going to be reviewing it tomorrow. And I'm so excited for it to be released into the world.
Okay, well, please let us know. We're going to keep an eye out, but please let us know when it does, and we would love to support for sure and get that out there. So anyways, thank you so much, Danielle. We appreciate your time, and good luck with everything moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It was great to be here.
Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable podcast.